Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you're having had a fantastic day. Provided you aren't, you should allow yourself the context necessary to put things in perspective. Given you are listening to this and you have access to the internet, you have more opportunity than so many could hope for. Plan of attack regarding this call. I'm actually having a call with Dylan, who is in fact the first person to ever have a podcast with me, or to ever interview me, in fact. And I was very humbled and felt very privileged at the time that he was interested in some of the things that I could potentially have spoken about and some of the things that we did talk about in that particular podcast. So again, first and foremost, Dylan, thank you for the opportunity to do that when you did. Since I've actually created a fair bit of content myself on Spotify and iTunes, and they're the platforms that he was actually posting to at the time, and he's noticed some of the traction that such content has resulted in for me, and he's curious as to some of the things that he could potentially be doing differently to result in greater traction for him. Let's see how this goes. Good afternoon, Dylan, you handsome devil. How are you?
Afternoon. How are we going, mate?
I'm always well, my friend. Always well. Now, first and foremost, what are you wearing? In the least creepy way possible, what are you wearing?
I'm wearing a t-shirt. I'm trying to figure out how to grant access to my camera. I'm trying to figure it out.
Oh, that's a dangerous move. Be careful. Be careful. But no, I have absolute faith that you are. Of course, you wouldn't have the audacity to have a phone call with me, a podcast with me, a Skype call with me, if you weren't wearing my apparel, right?
Yeah, I know.
I appreciate you, Dylan. You're a team player. The world needs more like you. It really does. So, plan of attack. First and foremost, again, like it's reason as to why I'm as inclined to have this conversation with you is because I'm in absolute support of what you are trying to create awareness regarding. I really am. Like I am absolutely for your cause, Dylan. For those that aren't yet aware as to what that cause is, give us a bit of an insight as to what you were trying to do.
I'm just trying to basically inspire the youth that they can do whatever they want and not let society tell them otherwise.
And the means by which you were trying to do that is by interviewing those that you deem as inspirational in that sense, and those you deem as viable and able to speak from experience regarding some of the things they may have overcome or some of the things they may have tried their hand at that has resulted in them having a better understanding as to what they're capable of, right?
Yeah, 100%. Just people doing things that are outside the norm and most likely on their own little path, whatever it may be.
As I said, I'm in absolute support of that because, again, like so many people have issues regarding faith in themselves. They really do, and so many people factor in the opinions of others when they really shouldn't, and that's a huge hindrance that a lot of people struggle to overcome. That is a huge obstacle that many don't overcome. They strategize regarding what will render them or what they believe will result in them being better liked, and that is a huge mistake because for as long as you're strategizing in accordance to what you believe will result in people paying more attention to you or being more inclined to like you, it's always going to be at the expense of your happiness because you're likely going to be doing things that you wouldn't otherwise be interested in doing. And for as long as you're doing that, as I said, you're waging a war with yourself because you understand as to what you believe to be in your best interest, and provided what you were doing isn't congruent with that, provided what you're doing differs from that, again, you are going to be, as I said, like it's waging a war with yourself more or less. You are going to be, as I said, constantly questioning as to whether what you were doing is viable and whether it's worth, again, like whether the cost of opportunity, and by cost of opportunity I mean not pursuing what you believe is in your best interest, is worth, again, doing the things you believe will result in acceptance. Huge mistake, pandering for the sake of acceptance.
Definitely.
But at the moment, like I have a fair amount of context regarding the content you've produced to date. And that is that you are slowly being paid more attention to, right? It is growing from what I understand, it is growing at a rate that you are satisfied with.
Yeah. It's definitely like growing slowly, but I think one thing that I've learned, like with the podcast, is just being consistent with it. So
huge factor.
Yeah, that's one thing I've learned. The two words right now that keep popping up is consistency and being persistent. And
this is where there's a persistence. Persistence is viable provided what you were doing is working. That's where persistence. If you're good at what you're doing, good things will happen. But what I'm more curious regarding, how many instances or how many occasions have you actually given your audience the opportunity to make apparent what they actually want to hear, and not necessarily from select individuals, but more so from you. What have you done? See, this is where I'm well aware as to the impact you were trying to make. That is, I'm very understanding as to again, your intentions, because you have allowed me the context necessary. You actually did that in person. But I don't feel like you were touching on that all that much in your podcast. I don't feel like you're actually I don't feel like you're actually posting much content that actually creates awareness regarding what those that may be inclined to tune in could potentially gain from that podcast. That is where I feel like you were falling short. So the content itself, fantastic. Like there are two factors regarding how much attention is paid to, as I said, like either a service you will provide, or at the end of the day, it's a service you're providing. You are educating is basically what you're doing. People are only going to pay attention provided you're either educational or entertaining. And you are both, as far as I'm concerned. But where you are falling short, in my opinion, the actual content itself, fantastic. But where you are not creating as much awareness as you potentially could regarding the value of that content. That's where I feel like you're falling short, because you are, again, like and I feel like, again, just given the context I have, I feel like it's because you feel like what others have to say is more valuable than what you have to say, and that's why you're more inclined to post more content that's of relation to, as I said, like someone speaking their mind regarding something in particular, or someone making apparent their perspective or talking of their experiences, as opposed to you actually talking of the impact you were trying to make and your intentions regarding the podcast. Because as I said, like majority of the time, you post content, you talk about, again, what was actually spoken about with a particular individual regarding the podcast you were trying to create awareness of relation to. But as I said, I haven't seen all that many posts from you, and even in general conversation, you haven't actually given your audience all that much context regarding your intentions and what you were trying to achieve by doing that, and obviously how beneficial you believe the content you are creating, and obviously the time you are spending individuals you believe may have advice that benefits your audience. You haven't created all that much awareness in that sense. And that is what I wanted to highlight, because that's a huge, independent as to how good the steaks you are serving at your barbecue taste. If your signage sucks, no one's coming to that barbecue. That's the reality situation. So like on the flip side, provided tons of people are paying, provided no more people are paying attention and it's not growing at the rate you would hoped it would, what you'll end up experiencing is like a huge influx to begin with. That's just attributed to genuine interest in what you potentially have to say and what they could potentially learn from you. As I said, like taking podcasts with those you deem worthwhile having podcasts with. But provided the content sucks, then as I said, like it's no one's going to tune back in. So you'll notice your numbers will actually like decrease with time. But provided progressively more people are actually paying attention, it's not the content that's the issue. It's more or less the awareness you are creating regarding the quality of content. That is where I feel like you're falling short. And as I said, I honestly believe it's attributed to your opinion regarding the value you bring to the podcast. You are leaning into the value that you or certain others bring, and that is why you're as inclined to interview the people that you are. And as I said, obviously they're vital to interview in the sense that you're using them as leverage. But I can assure you, not many people can actually do what you do. Not many people are as good as you are at, again, like encouraging people to be as honest and, again, be as comfortable in front of the mic as you are. That is a strength of yours. You're very approachable, you are very articulate, and you are good at expressing yourself, and that renders others more inclined to be comfortable to elaborate further or to a degree that they otherwise wouldn't. So as I said, like you are good at what you do. I have the context necessary. You were the one that you were the first person to ever interview me, and I was pretty nervous at the time, if I'm honest. But as I said, the second I actually got talking to you, it became very apparent very quickly that again, like it wasn't going to be the conversation I had expected, and it wasn't. Again, at no point was I at all worried that you were potentially going to ask any intrusive questions. I was very comfortable in your presence, and that is a huge advantage. You are, as I said, you are someone that I can consume content from, and at no stage do I feel like you are doing so with selfish intentions. And as I said, like I'm also of the understanding that you. Again, like you are a believer in the impact you are trying to make. You are your biggest fan in the sense that you are understanding as to the potential benefits regarding the content you're creating. But as I said, like you were comfortable having that conversation with me in person. You were comfortable, even just then, you were comfortable making apparent your intentions. But you haven't actually done that all that much on social media. I feel like it's because you, as I said, you believe as opposed to you actually creating the content. You believe that the content that you are, as I said, like facilitating the creation of the content you are, and the advice you are helping others give is of more value than the advice you could potentially give, and again, the awareness you could potentially create regarding the advice that others are giving on your podcast.
Yeah, okay. So are you thinking maybe like when I do create some content around the podcast.
I'm thinking you speak more than you at present do. That for one. But two, again, like there are the majority of the posts that you are creating of relation to the podcast, it's pretty much you announcing the new podcast is live, and you're talking about the advice that particular individual has given during that podcast. But there aren't many posts where you aren't actually making reference to someone you've interviewed. There aren't many posts that you've actually put up that effectively, as I said, just create awareness for the podcast, but more so are of relation to the impact you are intending to make. More so the reason as to why you are doing it. Because your reason, that is your truth. The reason as to why you're inclined to do it, and the reason as to why, as I said, you have the interviews that you do, and you have had the interviews you do, and the reason as to why you're inclined to interview as often as you do is because you have a genuine interest in educating others. And that is why you're making an effort to reach out that, and you use the leverage that you have and the equity you've accumulated, given the people you've already interviewed, to interview those that you understand, to potentially be able to give advice that could benefit those that maybe in a tricky circumstance or may be in need of such advice, right? So you have that leverage, and that is what you're capitalising upon. And as I said, the reason as to why you're inclined to take the time to have those interviews is because you understand that they could potentially be beneficial to the audience that is already paying attention to you, right? But as I said, every post I've seen you make that's of relation to your podcast, you are more or less, which is again, like it's viable because there is credibility and association with those individuals, but you are more or less celebrating the achievements and efforts of the individual you are speaking with, as opposed to highlighting the benefit. Like there aren't many posts that aren't of relation to the person you interviewed that highlight some of the core reasons and some of the reasons that are effectively uniform regarding the podcast you've actually created to date. That, as I said, of relation to the reasons to why you're doing it to begin with, and of relation to, as I said, why you are as passionate about creating that content as you are.
Yeah, okay.
You haven't actually spoken about the more people trust you, because at the end of the day, you are the common denominator. There are going to be people you will interview each and every week. And they're going to be different. They're going to be different people every time. But regardless as to who you interview, you are the person doing the interview. You are the person in each of the podcasts. So obviously, the more you are able to establish a connection with your audience, the more you allow them the context necessary to better get to know you and better get to know the impact you are intending to make, the more inclined they're going to be to tune in, independent as to who you're actually interviewing. So, as I said, at the moment, I believe just attributed to the content you've created, you believe the reason people are paying attention is attributed to the people you're actually interviewing. You are yet to. I feel like you are yet to understand that there will be. Should you allow them the context to better understand your interest and get to know you to a greater degree than you have to date, there'll be people that will tune in not because of who you're interviewing, because it's you.
Yeah. Okay.
Because of the impact you are trying to make. Because people, anyone can interview anyone. But I'd be more inclined to interview. The more apparent you make it that your intentions are selfless, the more inclined people are going to be to tune in for no other reason than because they understand that the questions you are going to be asking are going to benefit them to a greater degree that's going to benefit you. And that is your intention. And you haven't highlighted that. Right? So the more context you give, the more you allow your audience to better understand who you are as a person, the attributes you have, and as I said, your intentions, independent as to who you are interviewing, whether they know them or not, whether they believe that their advice could potentially be of interest to them or not, given the person they understand you to be and the questions they understand that you are likely to ask, they're going to be inclined to tune in regardless, because they are of the understanding, again, that you are doing that to benefit them, and you believe you interviewing them benefits your audience to a greater degree than it does anyone else. And you haven't highlighted that.
And would I highlight that through the start of every podcast?
You can talk about it. I would definitely do. You can definitely talk. It wouldn't hurt to remind people as to why you were doing what you were doing at the start of every podcast. 100%. I don't recommend you ramble. I'm more or less talking about posts on Instagram, written text or videos that you, as I said, of you talking about the reason as to why you were doing it, the reason as to why you're as interested in creating the content you are, and addressing questions regarding your intentions, because you haven't done all. The reality situation, as I said, as far as I'm concerned, it's very apparent as to why you're interviewing the people that you are. That goes without saying. It's given the things that you've posted, very apparent. But the reason as to why, it's very apparent as to why you're interviewing the people you are. What is not apparent is the reason, what is not apparent and what you haven't made apparent, what you've been reluctant to make apparent, is what you actually get from doing that. And that is what you need to make apparent, because obviously the more apparent you make your intentions and the reason as to why you are doing it, the more inclined people are going to be to trust you. Should you make apparent what you've already told me? So the context I have and the understanding I have is that you are doing it because you have the best interest of your audience at heart, and you are trying to inspire and encourage. That is what you're trying to do, and you're trying to interview those that have experience, those that have overcome hardship, those that have accomplished things that you deem as exceptional or inspirational. And you are hoping that, as I said, by them giving advice regarding some of the things that they've done to date that has resulted in them being in the circumstance they are, that is going to benefit those that would also like to be in that circumstance. That's fantastic. Well done. But, as I said, you haven't said, all right, obviously there is something I get from this. Obviously there is something that, like, obviously this, I'm not doing this for no reason. Here is the reason as to why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I wish there was someone that was doing what I was doing, or that I am at present doing, because I believe that I would benefit from such content. And additionally, I love the feeling, the gratification that results in me, in people reaching out preceding the actual interviews that I've hosted, that make apparent that what was said, or as I said, like a question that was asked and addressed, was something that they benefited from hearing. So the more transparent you are, the more vulnerable you are, the more you make apparent that you do in fact get something out of this. Like you can say you're doing it for your audience all day, every day, but the reality situation is you do get something from that. So the more honest you are, the more inclined people are going to be to trust you. So provided you say, hey, this is actually what I'm doing it for, this is the reason as to why I enjoyed it as much as I do, and this is why I'm as inclined to do it as I am, it's because I love the feeling of appreciation. I love being the person that people credit and thank for asking questions that people could potentially benefit from hearing the answers to, asking questions to those that, again, like have the answers or could potentially have the answers. And I love being the person that people are, again, thankful for facilitating the answers to those questions.
Yeah, okay.
I love the reality situation is when you refer someone for the sake of conversation. So if you refer someone to a physiotherapist, right? The person that you refer, they thank you for the referral. They thank the physiotherapist. They also refer. They thank you, right? And that's a good feeling. Everyone loves that feeling. You're doing exactly the same thing. So what you were doing, you were connecting the dots. So you have people paying you attention that want answers addressed, and you are finding the person that could potentially answer those questions. Want questions addressed, sorry. You are finding the person that could potentially answer those questions, and you are asking them the questions that you believe your audience will benefit from, correct? That is what you're doing. So you can very well make apparent that you love the appreciation that doing so results in. And they're going to be more inclined to trust you. The more apparent you are regarding your interest in, as I said, the gratification doing what you were doing results in, the more honest you are regarding what you actually get from doing what you were doing, and the more inclined you are to speak of, as I said, like the impact you were trying to make and the reason as to why you're as motivated as you are to do it, attributed to what you actually gained from it. Fantastic, because you need to give your audience context, because at the end of the day, the people you interview, that's going to chop and change. Every single podcast is going to chop and change, but and people are only going to pay attention to those they believe. As I said, like if your credibility, if your leverage is 100% attributed of relation to the person you're interviewing, well, then people are only going to pay attention when they are interested in the person you're interviewing. Whereas, as I said, if you spend more time making apparent that independent to who you interview, you are going to do your very best to ensure that your audience benefits from such a conversation, attributed to the questions you ask, and again, attributed to the interest you have in the appreciation asking such questions will result in, should they be answered efficiently by the person you are interviewing, then boom, they're going to pay attention no matter what.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Exactly right. At the moment, as I said, the people that are paying attention, I feel like it's come down for the reason as to why you're inclined to do that is because you haven't yet all that much faith in yourself as a host, and that will come with time. That will come with, like, obviously the more experience you have, the more faith you're going to have in your own ability. The more feedback you get, the more faith you're going to have in your own ability as well. But at the moment, as I said, people are only going to pay attention to the podcast that you host, that you are, as I said, partaking in with someone they are actually interested in. But provided you give your audience an opportunity to take interest in you, then they're going to tune in regardless of who you actually interview. So if you're noticing huge variances regarding your audience podcast to podcast, you are yet to create enough awareness regarding your interests in the best or the impact you were trying to make, and your interests in addressing the questions that your audience may very well have, and your as I said, genuine interest in having those questions addressed and answered, the questions you believe they have and you believe they will benefit from having answered by those you believe are best suited to answering those questions.
Yeah, and which I am. So I literally
100% you are, and that's as I said. The more faith that they have in you, the more inclined they're going to be to tune in no matter what, understanding that you are going to do everything in your power to ensure that their time tuning in is not wasted. Because you are the one in control of the questions asked. You are the one in control of the questions, like pretty much like the content that is created. That is you. You are the one that actually dictates the way the conversation goes. You are the one that actually, as I said, if they understand, if for the sake of conversation, if they understand that because you have the reins and because you've again, you genuinely had their best interests at heart, that you are going to extract as much information as you believe, as possible from the individual that you believe could potentially address questions that your audience may be interested in. Fantastic. They're going to tune in no matter what. But if they are of the understanding that it's only worth tuning in should the person that you are interviewing, should the person that is partaking in the podcast be someone that is inclined to do that independent of who they're being interviewed by, well then there's the reason as to why you're having such variances regarding the amount of people tuning in.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Chris.
No, it's what I'm here to help because I enjoy the stuff you created. I really do. I enjoy what you're trying to do. I enjoy the impact you're trying to make. I appreciate that. The world needs more like you. It really does. But as I said, like those big variances regarding the amount of people actually consuming your content, that's 100% attributed to their interest in who is being interviewed. You need to, as I said, have like Joe Rogan, independent of who he's interviewing, people still tune in because they understand that Joe Rogan is going to do whatever he can to extract information from that individual that he believes his audience can benefit from, right? So that's what you need to start doing. You need to make sure that your audience understand, independent of who you are interviewing, that is your intention or what your intentions are, and that, as I said, you will ask whatever questions you believe they're going to benefit from most, as opposed to whatever questions you believe that are in the best interest of the individual you're interviewing answering. And that is what you need to make apparent.
Okay.
And that is going to result in people paying attention, independent to who you are actually interviewing, because they are faithful in the sense that you are not going to waste their time. They are faithful in the sense that they are faithful in understanding that, as I said, like what you get from that is the more they benefit, the more grateful they're going to be for such content, and obviously that is what you are interested in. So the more you make apparent that you are there's no endorsement deals. The more you make apparent that, as I said, what the questions you're asking aren't necessarily in the best interest of the person addressing those questions, more so your audience. And as I said, that's also in relation to the impact you were trying to make, given the understanding you have regarding the outcome, asking such questions and having such questions addressed result in regarding your audience's appreciation for the time you've spared to put yourself in that position. Well, then fantastic. Like everybody wins. Yeah.
And do you reckon I'd do that by like at the start of every video saying that, or more so just like maybe
it's going to be a lot easier to articulate. It depends on the means by which you believe you're best communicating that via. Simple as that. So until you have context, you're not going to know as to what is more clear, because at the end of the day, it's your audience perception that matters. So I would try and interview, like I would make that apparent at the start of 2 or 3 different podcasts, and then from there, I would also it's prior to each podcast. I would not even prior to, but you could very well every second day for the sake of conversation, you could just reiterate what you were trying to achieve by posting the content you are. And by creating the content you are, you can write that down, couple it with a photo of you in front of the mic, and just say, hey, a little bit of background regarding my intentions for those that aren't yet aware, and you can literally give an insight as to what you are trying to achieve and why you're as inclined to do it via written text, so it can be referenced multiple times by those that have either forgotten or by those that are potentially interested in showing their friends and giving their friends a bit of an insight as to who you are as a person before they tune into that podcast.
Yeah, okay. So what you were trying to achieve, and what was the other one?
Oh, basically, what you are doing is you want your audience to tune in, independent as to who you are interviewing, right? So provided there are huge discrepancies, huge differences regarding your views, regarding your downloads, each podcast, as I said, the reason as to why that's the case is because there are people that are more or less tuning in accordance to the attention you are being paid is dictated by who you are interviewing at that particular point in time, right? Whereas you want the attention you are paid to be somewhat uniform, because they are understanding that you are going to ask the questions that will benefit them most, as opposed to tuning in because they believe the person you are interviewing is likely to address topics that they will benefit from. So if they know, no matter who you're interviewing, that you are the one that asks questions that you believe to be in the best interest of your audience having answered, well, then they're going to tune in no matter what. Whereas, as I said, like if they are simply of the understanding that the conversation is more or less just going to flow, and the person that you are interviewing at that particular point in time may not be as inclined to address such questions, or they believe that particular person may not have anything, given the whatever it is they are doing, or the experience they might have, or the context they have regarding that individual, that it might not benefit them all that much, they're not going to tune in. But as I said, provided your audience is also interested in, or of the understanding, and it's attributed to the awareness you've created, that you are the one that's going to dictate the pretty much like the path of the conversation and all that is discussed regarding that conversation. They have faith that you are asking questions they believe to be in their best interest, and asking questions you believe to be in their best interest. Or again, they're going to tune in no matter what.
Yeah. Okay.
So you need to ensure not only. As I said, like it's at the moment, people are tuning in because they're tuning in accordance to the reason they're tuning in is because they believe there are certain individuals that you interview from time to time that are going to have things that they say that might very well resonate with them. But as I said, provided you make sure and make an effort to create awareness regarding that, independent as to who you are interviewing, independent as to what you are doing, and independent as to that person's field of expertise, you are going to ask questions that they will likely benefit from, and you make sure they understand that. Fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's going to increase.
It's going to be a huge factor, because at the moment, as I said, you haven't actually your as far as your audience is concerned, the questions you ask are more so going to be like the questions you ask. Because you simply haven't created any context regarding that, you haven't actually given your audience the opportunity to better understand what your intentions are. And you have vaguely, but you haven't actually gone into detail. And that's because, as I said, you believe that posting of the accomplishments of those you are interviewing is going to result in more people paying attention. But the reality of the situation is, as I said, they will pay attention depending on who you actually interview, but you want people paying attention regardless. And you do that by having your audience of the understanding that no matter who you interview, they're going to learn something, because you are going to make sure of that.
Yeah.
That's your job.
Okay.
How much is gained from a podcast isn't attributed to the person that's interviewed. It's attributed to the questions asked.
Yeah.
And that is dictated by you. And you need to create awareness regarding that to ensure your audience have faith in you, not so much the person you are interviewing, that their time is not going to be wasted and that they're going to learn something.
Yeah. Yeah, wow.
That's what you need to do.
Okay. I'm on to it.
That's my boy. That's my boy.
I've got a podcast I was gonna upload today, but I'm gonna try and restructure some content around it to answer that, essentially.
Oh, as I said, at the moment, the content you're posting, it's fantastic content, but your signage sucks. So that's what you need to do. You need to, as I said, invest just as much time in the signage to create awareness regarding what could potentially be gained by tuning in, as you have the actual podcast itself. There's two factors. The content itself, that's great. You are fantastic at creating that. What you have, and you know that. You invest more time in the actual podcast itself than you do the posts that create awareness for such a podcast, right?
Yeah, definitely.
You know that. But there are two huge factors, because as I said, there could be someone, for the sake of conversation, there are a lot of people creating podcasts. Some podcasts suck. Yours does not suck. And there are also other people that are, those podcasts, however, even though they suck, they're being paid more attention to. And the reason being is because that person is more efficiently communicating to their audience what their audience could potentially gain from tuning in. And your audience has tons to gain, but you aren't efficiently making apparent how much they can potentially gain from that conversation, attributed to, as I said, your intention as a host, and again, your skill set as a host, and as I said, the questions that you are inclined to ask, not because they necessarily benefit the person, not because you necessarily believe it's going to benefit the person that you were interviewing, no, because you understand those questions to be relevant, and because you understand they are the questions that your audience is likely to want to have addressed and answered. And that is what you need to do.
Okay.
Joe Rogan's not in the position he is because of who he interviews. He's in the position he is because of how good he is at interviewing and how much awareness he's been able to create regarding his ability as a host.
Yeah.
And that is something you haven't done as of yet. You haven't actually created awareness regarding your ability as a host, because that is a huge factor regarding, like, if people have to choose between two podcasts and both are of relation to the same thing. Again, they're going to tune into the person that has sold themselves, has created the greatest awareness regarding what their audience could potentially gain from tuning into that podcast.
Yeah.
Because no one actually knows how valuable it is until they tune in.
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
So you've got to invest more time and energy giving people reasons to tune in. And that reason I advise you to make apparent the reason as to why it's viable to tune in to particular podcasts attributed to who you're interviewing. But that is not the only reason they should be tuning in. They should also be tuning in because of your interest in their best interests and how inclined you are to ask how inclined you are to ask specific questions that you believe are going to benefit your audience to the greatest degree.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm onto it, Chris. It's gonna happen.
That's my boy.
Watch it grow.
That's the reason as to why I made time for this call. I want to see it grow. I want to see it grow. Now, I believe in you. Prove me right.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
No, I've got you. I appreciate you making the time to interview me to begin with. That fueled the fire.
Yeah. It's awesome. I love it.
I'm doing one every second day.
Yeah, are you?
Not here to play around, my friend. Not here to play around.
No.
But no, as I said, tonight, when you make a post creating awareness for the podcast you are about to upload, I want to see you talk about the reason as to why it's viable to tune in, attributed to the questions you ask, attributed to why you believe you're best suited to hosting that, and why you believe that, again, like it's in your best interest, your audience's best interest, that you also host those podcasts.
Okay. Yeah. And do you reckon I'd do that on my Instagram story?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It's okay. Hey, I'm about to upload another podcast. This one is particularly interesting. Reason being, I asked some very, you could say intrusive, obviously subject to the content that's actually been created, but you could say I asked some very, some questions I believe will resonate, some questions I believe that some questions that resulted in answers that I'm certain will resonate with those interested in bang, 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 bang. And I attribute their answers to the manner with which I asked that. As I said, you create some awareness regarding your ability as a host that's going to render people more faithful, that independent to who you interview, it's going to be a good podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I've restructured my whole mindset around it, because I used to just sell it on the person who's coming in, but now I think you've just installed that I need to sell myself and have a bit more self-belief in myself that I'm a good host.
100% do. I'm telling you now you do. Because if it's just on that person, people are only going to tune in provided they like that person or they believe that person's going to be inclined to, as I said, address things in a manner that they deem viable. But as I said, if you've got an audience that understands no matter who you interview, it's going to be a good interview because of how good you are as a host and the questions you are inclined to ask. And again, that you are genuinely interested in your audience benefiting to the greatest degree they can, they're going to tune in no matter what. That's what I'm suggesting. That's what you need to create awareness regarding.
Yeah. Okay. Watch it tonight. Watch it on my Instagram.
I will. Link me directly the second it goes up, all right?
Yeah, all right. We'll do.
Oh, perfect.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Well, welcome, you handsome devil. Link me tonight, all right?
Yeah, sounds good.
Done. Have a good afternoon, buddy.
Bye.
See you, bro.